I'm saying to y'all, though, and I know we got to go to break, and we didn't necessarily go there, and maybe we should. There are so many layers in this conversation around the way that it's being discussed. When you right, no. And yes, Shannon, I know y'all are going to say and Stephen A., I know you're going to, you just shared that you have talked about the WNBA on your program too. You guys may not have said everybody, but the prevailing sentiment for folks that are just joining the WNBA and following women's sports is unfair to the women of this league, to your point, who have laid the groundwork for Caitlin Clark.
So will Caitlin Clark be a good pro? Absolutely. Will Caitlin Clark come into the WNBA and do what she's doing right now immediately? Absolutely not. Not gonna happen.
Since we're getting into the crazy reasons why they couldn't keep ignoring her, ESPN has finally done the unthinkable and acknowledged Caitlin Clark as a WNBA phenomenon. By acknowledged, I mean that they have reluctantly acknowledged that this basketball queen is about to rock the sports world. Let's face it, if she were any more legendary, they probably would have to start giving out basketballs with her face on them.
Beautiful time, and I don't think anybody that is a part of this league or has covered this league, sure, we lament kind of keeping this little thing that we loved protected from all of the noise, right?
Right.
But in the same breath, the eyeballs and the visibility and the growth is better for all involved. I mean, frankly, John, like, Caitlin Clark got me here, right? You know?
The roles have been reversed, and ESPN, the prestigious sports journalism organization, is finally waking up to recognize Caitlin Clark as the basketball phenomenon that she is. This is the same ESPN that once pretended that Caitlin Clark was a niche internet sensation for niche basketball fans. You know, the ones who read actual basketball statistics rather than merely tweeting about the player's socks color.
WNBA season starting to ramp up and media days taking place around the league. Today was media day for the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark prepares for her sophomore season. She won the Rookie of the Year award. She averaged 19 points, 8 assists per game, led the Fever to their first postseason in 8 years. She also finished the season 4th in MVP voting last year. But this season, take a look. Clark is the favorite for the MVP. Slightly shorter odds than A'ja Wilson. That's important because the preseason MVP favorite has gone on to win the award in each of the last.
Let's talk about last season, when Caitlin Clark was out there rewriting history books like a high school student who just found the cheat codes for his video game records. She was breaking them like they were made of cardboard, but ESPN decided that wasn't enough and instead wanted to give A'ja Wilson the MVP award. Wow. How quickly things change when you start breaking records left and right.
Why?
I'm not sure. Perhaps A'ja Wilson once saw a basketball court and decided to stay there. Could it have been the power of a strong social media presence or the brand loyalty ESPN had going for her? Perhaps they needed a more eye-catching headline for their NBA Twitter account? It's adorable when ESPN chooses to give out MVP awards to anyone with a strong Instagram game. But let's not forget that Caitlin Clark was out there breaking records like she was on a basketball bender.
What Caitlin has done for not just college basketball, but for women's basketball, period, I think has been great. The following, people watching the game, sellouts that we haven't seen ever. It just really bothers me, though, when people just take bits and pieces of what they want to take and they don't listen to everything and you don't hear everything. It wasn't personal. One, it was my opinion on how I think she'll be at the next level, because I do remember me saying that Caitlin, to me, could be the best college shooter I've ever seen. When you put these expectations on these young women in college to go to the next level and be immediately dominant, and when that doesn't happen, then people come back and say, oh, she was a bust, she was a flop, she wasn't that good. Just let them do what they're doing in college, enjoy what they're doing in college, and let them become stars in the WNBA.
The kind of season where you wondered if she had a personal grudge against the laws of physics. Yet for some reason, the MVP award went to someone who didn't break records, break the internet, or appear to be a one-woman highlight reel. It's similar to seeing someone receive a trophy for arriving at class on time while the child who completed all of their tests and constructed a functional robot in the corridor is ignored. Sure, you didn't misplace your homework, but let's give the person who made it through the door a prize.
I would be remiss if I didn't say this. A lot of this noise came by people that were sitting on this network. They tried to minimize her, said, well, you giving her all this credit. What about the women that came before her? What the women came before her, what they did cannot be taken away. That ain't got nothing to do with Caitlin Clark. But there was a lot of people tried to make sure they keep Caitlin Clark in her place, because what you're doing, if you give her all this shine, you minimize what they.
However, the plot becomes more complex. As usual, ESPN is a little late to the party and decides it's time to give Caitlin Clark some props. Well, I'm shocked because they spent the entire season acting like she was just a passing fad, but I suppose they couldn't ignore her any longer when every basketball fan who was even remotely interested began to point out that Clark was playing like a monster and that her stats were ridiculously better than almost everyone else's. When the fans, those annoying people who actually attend games, began shouting, "Hey ESPN, stop acting like she's some random underdog." At least that's what you would think. You kind of have to pay attention, but ESPN and all of its experts waited until they were forced to acknowledge that Clark was an unstoppable force. They pretended to have found gold in their backyard and exclaimed, "Oh, well, look, Caitlin Clark is great, who knew?" The entire world knew, ESPN, but it's better late than never, right? Unfortunately, their tardy recognition cannot undo the many times they pretended she wasn't worth watching, but I suppose it's better now than never. However, the true MVP in this case are the fans who were aware from the beginning.
Really what we're going to see from Caitlin this year, it's not just being able to get better on the court, it's also, she's described this greater level of comfort and being that second-year pro player. And I actually asked her today at Media Day how she described where she's at this point this year compared to this point last year.
Now ESPN is like, "Oh, hey, remember that Caitlin Clark? She's amazing. She's a freaking superstar." Oh my goodness. It only took a whole season of her dominating for you to catch up. Thank you, ESPN, for finally realizing what the rest of the world had figured out months ago. It's really like when your friend who hated a band you love shows up at the concert wearing a band t-shirt and acts like they've been there from the beginning. "Oh, I've been listening to them forever." Yeah, buddy, don't be too shocked when everyone else is trying to remind you of your prior egregious and highly visible ignorance. Let's also talk about ESPN's ranking system. As everyone knows, ESPN enjoys ranking players. In fact, it's almost like a sport in and of itself. However, just when you think they've done something fair, they pull off some outrageous antics that make you question whether they were rating based on the same game that everyone else was watching.
Look like she's always in great shape, never afraid of the moment. Again, we're talking about Caitlin Clark here. The spotlight been on her for years. She's not going to shy away from it. I expect her to be in the MVP conversation.
Take last year, for instance, Caitlin Clark, remember, her the one who basically turned basketball into a one-person show, was ranked behind A'ja Wilson again. Because, why, who knows, maybe Wilson has a better PR team, maybe it's because ESPN's so used to ranking players based on who they've known the longest instead of who actually performed. It's honestly a mystery. So here's ESPN ranking A'ja Wilson above Clark, even though Clark already had the kind of season you only read about in fairy tales or perhaps a really extravagant basketball movie, but let's not forget how everything changed now. I mean, who could ignore the irony after they ranked her lower than Wilson last season after they pretended her name was just some passing blip? They are now throwing a parade in her honor. Caitlin Clark is getting praised like she just solved world hunger, and ESPN's acting like they've been on her bandwagon from the start. It's almost sweet in a way. I mean, sure, ESPN had to spend the entire season pretending to be oblivious, but at least now they've recognized the phenomenon they tried to downplay.
We know that the expectations for Caitlin Clark, they are constant and they are high. How does she continue to deal with that?
Well, the thing with Caitlin Clark, Malika, is that she's so self-motivated, and she even described herself to me today as self-aware, that she really knows what it will take to be able to elevate her game from all of that great success she enjoyed in her rookie season to now this sophomore year. One of the things that she mentioned to me today is that right after the Fever hired new head coach Stephanie White, one of the first things that Clark did with the staff was sit down in the film room, and they really dissected her game film to be able to figure out what were the areas that she really needed to work on.
It seems as though ESPN went from asking, "Who is this Caitlin Clark person?" to saying, "Okay, we get it now. We really get it in a matter of months." I'm just waiting for the inevitable about-face moment, where they act as though they were the first to discover her. It will likely include a montage of her best moments, with dramatic music playing in the background. We'll see slow-motion shots of her making three-pointers from half-court as if she were playing a completely different game than the rest of the world. Of course, Caitlin Clark will deserve all of that, but let's not forgetting the part last year when ESPN literally had their collective heads in the sand, with a performance that makes you ask, who needs the NBA when we have this? Caitlin Clark is deserving of all the praise she is receiving. She is setting records, creating history, and elevating the women's game to such an extent that even LeBron James might begin to doubt his choice to remain in basketball.
A lot of people say that Caitlin Clark moves the needle. That is wrong. She is the needle. She dictates. We all know what she's done on the floor. It's history, right? But off the floor, my goodness, she and the Indiana Fever accounted for 45% of all the broadcast value of the WNBA last season. She accounted also for helping drive the numbers of merchandising up 500%, of course.
Let's not ignore the fact that ESPN in typical fashion dropped the ball on this one. They were too busy fawning over the same tired stories and playing it safe, while a player who would eventually redefine the game was out here doing things that made you wonder if she had been accidentally born in the wrong era. And the best part is they can't even pretend they didn't. The proof is in the stats, and Caitlin Clark's stats were borderline absurd. She was literally rewriting what it meant to be a point guard. Her points per game were so high they could have been used as a new standard for scoring in all basketball leagues. She was hitting insane numbers from beyond the arc that had you wondering if she was just standing there with a remote control, casually pressing buttons and making the ball go in every single time. And don't even get me started on her vision on the court. She was making passes that made you wonder if ESPN was paying attention at all, or if they were too busy sticking to their typical programming, which, let's be honest, was probably a rerun of some drama no one cares about anymore.
That Caitlin Clark, what she's doing doesn't minimize what they've done, but we should have been giving her the credit. We saw the ratings, we saw the merchandise sales, we saw the attendance, but y'all want to make it about something else. Oh, what about the women that laid the foundation? What about this? What about it? That ain't got nothing to do with Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is box office. She's doing this. And instead of giving her credit, y'all tried to make it about, oh, y'all.
However, Caitlin Clark has suddenly become the most popular person in basketball, and ESPN is obsessed with her. They will likely make every move she makes seem almost annoying. Don't be shocked when the next highlight reel features slow-motion shots of her draining shots, as though she's literally defying the laws of physics. The network that used to hardly give her any attention is now treating her as though she's the greatest thing to happen to basketball since Michael Jordan decided to make a dunk an art form. What's really funny, though, is that ESPN can't even pull off the "we always knew" narrative. They can't pretend that they were on the Caitlin Clark bandwagon from the beginning. The receipts show that they were too busy investing in safe generic content and fluff pieces to notice the true talent that was right in front of them. No matter how many dramatic montages they put together now, you can't deny that.
Caitlin Clark, in terms of the BS that she had to deal with off the court. You got to remember, she's been box office, she was the main attraction, and there were so many storylines that's been associated with her. Most recently, the whole thing with her and Cheryl Swoops, even though it really wasn't her, it was Cheryl Swoops and all this. Every time you turned around, there was something that she had to deal with. The reason I bring that up, and I love that, because as a rookie, ladies and gentlemen, put this in perspective. Caitlin Clark finished the regular season leading rookies in scoring, field goals made, three-point field goals made, assists, steals, and minutes played, and she led the league in assists and three-pointers made.
The day's conclusion, Caitlin Clark's rise, is all the more satisfying because of ESPN's delay in recognizing her greatness. It's like watching someone miss the big play and then try to act like they were the ones calling the shots all along. Sure, they've jumped on the bandwagon now, but they're still a few steps behind. And we all know it. You could literally take half of her games, and they'd still be better than some of the MVP caliber performances they were hyping up at the time. ESPN just had to act like they were waiting for the perfect moment to admit they were wrong, but by the time they caught up, Caitlin Clark had already left the competition in the dust. The truth is, ESPN's so-called late recognition is the perfect encapsulation of how sports media works. It's all about who they decide is worthy of attention. You can break records all day long, but unless they can figure out how to slap a shiny, marketable bow on, you don't expect them to notice Caitlin Clark being the basketball force she Is didn't fit the mold ESPN wanted to follow, so they just put her in the too good to ignore category for far too long.